Hello, everyone. Nice seeing all these faces tonight. Welcome to Zibby's Bookshop. It's great to have you here. We are very excited to celebrate the launch of Sisters in Death by Eli Frankel. Congratulations. He is in conversation tonight with it's Kyle Lowens, husband of Zibby Owens, who owns this bookstore. Very excited to have you both. It'll be about a 30-minute conversation between the two of them. We'll open it to a Q&A. And then
30 minutes?
We got a while, but enjoy.
How are we going to get just 30 minutes?
We got to get a race.
I was thinking it was like 2 hours.
Yeah, we should do that.
All right. Well, no one's leaving tonight.
The doors are locked.
We are here. My flight was just canceled back to New York. So we're here all night, you guys. All right. So settle in. Take that jacket off, sir, and just get comfy. Take those boots off. Let the feet breathe. All right. There it is. All right. So Eli Frankel. This is a really surreal moment actually for me, guys, because Eli, so I'm in the world of production. Very fortunate. Two of my partners are here who run my company, Morning Moon, but there would be no Morning Moon Productions if it wasn't for Eli, because Eli brought me into the business, took me under his wing years and years and years ago and taught me everything. And so I couldn't be more grateful to you, and so excited for you and all your success. And obviously this book.
Thank you.
Yeah, give
Thank
it
you,
up for Eli. So, Eli.
Yeah.
The Black Dahlia.
Yes.
What drew you to this case in the first place?
Yeah. So
also, what made you write? Because this is your first book.
I'm not a writer.
You're not a writer.
No.
Yet you're an amazing writer.
Thank you.
All right.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the first time I ever heard of the case was in 1999. I was an editor at E! Entertainment Television, and we were dubbing tapes for different shows back then. You put VHSs and machines and press record and dub them. And I remember seeing a discarded VHS on a table that had written on it in pen, The Black Dahlia. It was an episode of one of the shows that they were editing. And I remember thinking, what the heck is the Black Dahlia? Just the name right away got me. And so we weren't allowed to do this because it's all confidential, but I popped it in the VHS and started watching, and I almost got fired for that. But I was obsessed with it right off the bat. And for about the next 20 years, pretty much read every book, every article, listened to every podcast on it, soaked everything up. And, in this particular case, there's a ton of information, but it's sort of there's a certain body of information about it that everybody knows. It's kind of regurgitated, maybe reorganized, but what's known about the case is known and has been made public and has been repeated a million times. So by 2018, 2019, I was just a passive kind of hobbyist. And then through a show I was doing called Helter Skelter, are
there some Helter Skelter people in the audience?
Yeah, there are a couple.
Because it's strange if you're just looking at them and they have nothing to do with it.
Right, yeah.
Helter Skelter. I could see some of you over there.
We were doing a documentary, and so the researchers there were terrific, and I actually asked for their help, and just for a few minutes on the side, maybe helping me get some documents from the city of LA about the Black Dahlia. And boy, did they come through. They were able to get about 1,000 pages from the district attorney files and some of the police reports that had been released over the years but weren't made public. And all of a sudden I'm reading through these documents and I'm thinking to myself, there's so much information here that's never been printed, that isn't publicly known. And if we could kind of enter that into the body of knowledge of the case, it might really change.
So how long ago was that? Because you said there's so many books about this.
Yeah.
Obviously the story is so well documented. What made you think there's got to be more that people don't know?
Well, I mean, the whole time I've been reading about this case, I just thought, wow, I've read all this information before. And there's all these things, every time you read a book, it was just sort of reorganizing what's known, as I said before, and going through all these original documents, I realized in that moment that there is more research to be done and we can dig deeper. And instead of just accepting what is sort of the body of knowledge that's been out there, is that we can, there is a path to having a different perspective on the case and finding out more information. So yeah, that was, that was a kind of transitional moment. That was around 2018. But I was
And so was it just sort of research online, Google, what have you, sort of those VHS tapes?
Oh, I'd done that already.
Right. So, but did you actually get out into the field? Did you get on an airplane? Did you go out there?
So that didn't come yet.
Did you meet the people?
Not yet. So I had, I was working pretty hard at that time, and we had a few shows going. And it was sort of just a hobby that on the weekends or, a couple hours at night, I would, steal away time to dig into this case or whatever. But again, it was sort of a hobby. And then the pandemic hit, and we're all at home. Everybody's looking for things to do. We have a lot of time on our hands, and it was either that or bake sourdough bread and become an expert sourdough bread maker. But of course, I chose the Black Dahlia because there's something wrong with me. And I really started diving in, and then I started getting tools like Ancestry.com and newspapers.com. It was just like literally the pandemic really forced me to focus and to figure out how to do research on a different level. And then subsequently in the year afterwards, I started reaching out to people who had been like tangentially involved in the case, and then started more of the deep digging and getting into archives and vaults. And so it's been an interesting journey.
And where did that journey take you?
Wow. Well, I mean, it took me to Kansas City. I remember.
What did you find in Kansas City?
Well, there was quite a bit. I fortuitously met the head of the archival head of University of Missouri, Kansas City, who it turned out was obsessed with the Black Dahlia and also the other murder in Kansas City in 1941 that is featured in the book. Those are the sisters in death. And he had this whole body of, knowledge and archival materials that he had been amassing over the years. And I had mine, and we started sharing everything we had. And it was like nitro and glycerin. It was all of a sudden we started making all these connections. We're still emailing. Like this morning, we had like 6 emails back and forth about some tiny detail that we're chasing down.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a weird obsession. And he took me to the vaults at the university and sent me a lot of stuff. And I got to go to the neighborhood where the murder occurred. And the actual house where the murder occurred in 1941 is owned by a very, very crotchety older woman who did not want anything to do with me and did not want me to step into her house, but all her neighbors were so interested. And so
you eventually charmed her and got her to talk?
No. She okay, so
she's actually here tonight in the audience.
It's like, this is your life.
Right? Yeah. We're gonna bring her out.
All right, great. She has a baseball bat. So the neighbors, though, were the exact opposite. The neighbors wanted to know everything. And they said, come in the backyard. And if you climb that tree, you can overlook her property, which is what I did. So I remember.
That feels like a joke.
No, it's real.
And you climbed a tree?
Yeah. And I was hanging off a branch and taking photos of her backyard, which my mom, who is a lawyer, informed me I cannot do or ever show online. But she walked out of the house onto her porch, folded her arms and stared at me with eyes of death. But nonetheless, I needed the photographs of the backyard to get the kind of geography and the layout and stuff. So sometimes you have to take some risks in this business.
Wow. Well, we have some more people coming in, which is lovely. If anybody wants to take these chairs in the front, go for it. Come on.
That's
all the way
make
up.
them not want to.
Don't be shy. Yeah, come on up to the front. We've got one there. We've got one there. Yeah, pop in. Love it. Well done. Well done. Yeah.
Sure.
So have you always been sort of obsessed, if you will, with true crime and sort of human behavior and murders?
No.
I mean,
I am not interested in those things at all. Unfortunately, at some point in my 20s, when I was around 24, 25 years old, I remember just the light bulb went off. This is great. I love true crime. And
what was the thing that you were like, oh, damn, that's really cool?
It's embarrassing.
Is it going to be weird?
I mean, totally weird. I discovered Ed Gein. Is that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people recently discovered Ed Gein,
yeah.
thanks to the show.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I was one of the original Gein fans.
Gein freak.
Yeah. I think my family thought I was nuts, but I remember we were on a family trip and I was reading a book about it, and everyone thought, why are you reading this? But it just, the poison was in the wound. I was obsessed with it. And I was really also attracted to the idea of being able to, again, read the evidence and see what the police thought, and in its totality to try to figure out what's missing here. What do they not know? So it was a kind of natural curiosity that right off the bat.
And how do you sort of emotionally process a lot of this very dark material that you're ingesting? Because I know you have a lovely wife and you have kids and you're a family man, yet you're sort of consumed in this dark world, this dark underbelly.
You're saying I have a dark side?
Listen.
All right.
All right. So how are you sort of ingesting that, processing that, and then going to sleep at night? Are you sleeping?
Yeah. So I think my obsession with true crime is not about the gory reality of it. It's more, again, the evidence and putting the pieces together. And I think in a weird way, even though I can't ever bring justice for the victims, there's a sense that if we can figure this out, it'll somehow make things right, which of course it can't. But it is a challenge. I love the science of it, and I love the investigative work, and I love the stories of the people behind it. But there've been a lot of moments where I've been really disturbed by what I've read, and ironically by what I've written. It's weird, you have to
scared yourself.
Well, it was more that you have to
disturbed myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You are dealing with really disturbing subject matter, and so when you have to think about what these victims suffered through, which you try not to do as much as possible, it's kind of an unfortunate byproduct of doing the research.
Wow, sir, we have a reserved seat for you right here. We are so lucky tonight to be joined by David Shea this evening. Unbelievable. Dave, give it up for David Shea, you guys. He was only 15 minutes late, but he was waiting for the mailman to come to deliver the book. Right. Even though he was coming to the bookstore where he could have gotten the book. All right.
Thank you.
What do you feel? Is there any sort of misconceptions about true crime out there that you feel like people would maybe get over, or do you feel like people are maybe really, really obsessed with true crime?
Yeah, they're definitely obsessed with true crime, and it's been really interesting having kind of gotten into it in the 90s. And I know I'm aging myself here, but it obviously wasn't as big. And then there were been these kind of seminal moments, like when Serial first premiered in 2014. That was a huge moment. And even Mindhunter in 2017 or 2018, all of a sudden people became aware of kind of the psychological profiling aspect. It's matured in a lot of ways too. I feel like 20, 30 years ago, people just wanted the kind of the titillating gore. And now, especially when you listen to podcasts that are 10 hours long, and they've got millions of downloads and they're dense, and you have to consider different perspectives and angles. I think that actually, in a lot of ways, true crime has matured, and also people's capacity to sort of understand it in a multi-layered fashion has also really matured.
Wow. When you're writing this book, did you sort of see the path forward from beginning to end, or did you start and did things sort of evolve and change? Everything's all right over there.
We've got a true crime situation here. We'll investigate.
Yeah, anything can happen here.
That's right.
So did the book take any turns for you while you were writing it that surprised you?
Yeah.
You want to tell everybody?
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, you want me to answer the question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're just like, yeah.
I'll
tell you. We should get together later.
That's right. These are just yes and no answers to that. We're gonna burn through these questions.
That was a yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, it was actually really surprising how many twists and turns and kind of surprising, shocking moments there were. One of the most surprising was that I got in touch with the woman who discovered the body originally in 1947. She was still alive at 102 years old. I didn't know if she were still alive.
While you were talking to her?
Yeah, while I was talking to her,
Okay.
I figured it out.
All right.
I didn't know if she was still alive, and she was very private, so it's not like there was any information. But about 6 months before she passed on, I was able to communicate with her through her daughter Anne, who had been present at 3 years old when the body was found as well. And I was asking her. I had some kind of burning questions about the way the body had been found, because there was some stuff that didn't make sense to me, and I thought she would. She might settle it with, okay, the arm was laid out in this way, or whatever. I don't know what my expectations were. And then she told me a shocking fact about the way the body of Elizabeth Short had been left that was completely contrary to what is the universally accepted narrative. And I mean,
well, what was that?
Well, so the way the story is what everybody knows, and this is also every retelling, every narration of the Black Dahlia saga begins with the same story. Every single one, every podcast, every book, every article. If you go online, you're going to read it this way. A 26-year-old blonde, pretty housewife is walking down a 2-block stretch of weed-strewn lot in Lemare Park in South Central Los Angeles. She's pushing a stroller with her 3-year-old daughter Anne in it. And she happens to glance to her right, and right there on the side, right next to the sidewalk in full plain view, is the fully, cleanly severed 2 parts of Elizabeth Short. And the body has been horribly tortured and mutilated. It is a shocking scene, and one that still haunts people today. It's all over the internet, the photographs. It's very dramatic. And then the police show up and tons of reporters, and thus begins the most famous unsolved murder case in American history. But the thing that bothered me about that story was that she found the body at 10:50 a.m. And it didn't make sense that on what was a heavily trafficked road, there were people up and down that street from sunup, that this body that had been laid out wouldn't have been seen by anybody else. And the way the body was left out for maximum shock value is what really inspired people's imaginations about who the killer could be. There was almost like a Marvel, super villain or something, somebody that wanted to shock the world and show them their work. I mean, it was perfectly symmetrically laid out, about 14 inches separated. You couldn't miss this thing. And yet everyone who walked up and down that street had missed it up until almost 11 a.m., which didn't make sense to me. So I asked her about it. And what she revealed to me is that it wasn't left on the grass right next to the sidewalk. It was actually left about 14 feet into the weeds in the lot. And it had been hidden in the weeds, in these tall weeds that had grown, you guys know LA. It's, there are areas where weeds just grow really, really high and then dry out. It essentially, the killer hadn't posed the body. The killer hadn't tried to shock and terrify the city. He wasn't making a statement about his power and what he was going to do next, which is what is always assumed. The truth is more mundane, and in some ways, I think, more scary. And it's just like every other serial killer we've read about in history. She was discarded like trash, and he hid her in the weeds and he threw her away. And it's sad, and it's a tragic end, and that is the truth of the way the body was left. And then the book also goes into what transpired over the next few minutes once the cops arrived, and how it went from what the killer did in terms of disposing her body to what later became the most famous scene maybe in true crime history.
So do you think from that it was sort of set up that way, maybe via the police?
Yeah, I mean, the police arrived. There is a 9-minute gap that exists between the arrival of the first set of officers, Perkins and Fitzgerald, and then when the second set of officers arrive. And they don't call back to University Station, where they're headquartered, until for another 5 minutes after they arrive. So if they would have seen the body, they would have called immediately, right? We've got this. I mean, this is a major case here, obviously. something happened in the 5 minutes in between them arriving and calling the university station. And what happened was that they didn't know what they had in front of them. It was hidden and it looked bizarre. It almost looked like a mannequin. And so they pulled the two halves out and laid them out on the side next to the sidewalk, and then realized what this was and called back to university station, and all hell broke loose. So it was a very it was a very kind of closely held secret. And in fact, the police talked later on, detectives later on spoke about that almost everything that was known about the case that they had discovered eventually got into the press. So there's this notion that there are files at LAPD that have never been released, but there's a lot of conspiracy theorists and people who are obsessed with the case who say, if we could just get those files, we could understand everything and figure out who the killer was. And yet, the LAPD said pretty much everything we discovered, the reporters got a hold of and printed, except for one fact about the case. And they stated that it had to do with the attitude or position of Elizabeth Short's body at the time she was found. And those last few words are so important. And that's the clue there. At the time it was discovered. And what they're saying there very subtly is it's Betty Bersinger who saw that and the first two cops. But that position, the attitude of the body changed between when it was discovered and all the photographs that we've all ever seen that, reporters were snapping as soon as they got there about 15 minutes later.
Now, I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but maybe some people know this in the audience. I don't know. But you actually solved the murder. And how did you put those two murders together and then come up with the eventual killer?
Yeah, so in the investigation of the Black Dahlia, one of the tasks, and it was an enormous investigation. At one point, there were 1,000 investigators from across the state of California and experts, and the highway patrol and the sheriff's department. There were investigators from Sacramento. It was a huge investigation. They were desperate to solve this thing. And one of the things one of the tasks the police set out to do was to create a very detailed timeline of exactly where Elizabeth Short was in the last few months of her life in Los Angeles and who she was with. Her movements, because she moved around a lot, were really crucial to them. And there was a missing gap of 6 days right before her body was found. But, we can pretty much assume that she was being held in captivity for those 6 days. But there was one more kind of black hole that they hadn't been able to crack. And it was a 3-day period, a month before she was murdered, and directly before she ends up escaping to San Diego, which is a big mystery in the case. Why did Elizabeth Short at midnight on December 9th get on a bus with no money and go down to San Diego, a city she had never been to before and didn't know anybody in? And that's, one of the core mysteries of this thing. And she hid out in San Diego for a month. And then after a month, she comes back to Los Angeles and immediately disappears. And they find her body 6 days later. So they couldn't figure out where she was in that 3 days right before she goes to San Diego, or who she was with. And eventually, and it's all described in the book what happened, but eventually they're able to locate the man she was with, who they determined when they questioned him was lying about pretty much everything, what his cover story, what he was doing with her. He admitted he had been with her for a day, but the way he described the timeline and where they were did not match up. They knew he was hiding something. So they started looking into his past. And what they discovered was that he had gone to school, he'd gone to college with a woman who in 1941 in Kansas City, went to college with her in Kansas City, that's where he grew up, in 1941 was brutally murdered in eerily similar circumstances to the murder of Elizabeth Short. And that started setting alarms off. Now, they needed the details of what happened in this murder so they could compare all of the facts. And they wanted to know much more about this suspect that they had. So they called over to the Kansas City Police Department, and they asked KCPD for all of the files on this case. And KCPD said, sure, we'll send them over. And they never did. And then LAPD asked again, and KCPD said, sure, we'll send them over. And again, they didn't. And this went on for 3 or 4 years. The LAPD never got the files. And so they were sort of hobbled by the lack of information they had. They pursued this suspect, and there was some information they had on him and certain things they found on the body of Elizabeth Short that connected him to her. And the book also reveals what that evidence was. So they were really determined to go after this guy. And in fact, he topped the suspect list up until the early 1950s when the case went cold. So there was a lot about this murder that they didn't know, but they knew just enough, the broad strokes, to understand that here's a guy who knew 2 different women who were killed with some very similar signatures in the murders. And then it just kind of, the case went cold and it kind of died. And so, there's all these books and articles coming out about suspects over the years. And I'm looking at this situation where you've got these 2 very similar murders, and you've got this weird 3-day period where she's not calling anybody, she's not in contact with anybody. And then right after she's with him, she makes this mysterious escape to San Diego. Maybe there's more to find there. And nobody had looked into him or looked into the details of this other murder. And so that's when I started investigating and deep diving, going to Kansas City. And
with everyone that you were speaking with, did you ever get in touch with anyone, were they even still alive, that had worked on this case in law enforcement?
No, it's everyone was gone, though a lot of their children were around, and some of them even had documents relating to it that
were they willing to talk to you?
Yeah, they did. It's weird. I called probably hundreds of people in the course of investigating this, and about 50% of them, they don't call back. And of the other 50%, 25, half of them kind of, they hear you out. Okay, got it. And you're doing this, and they're not interested. And then of the 25% that's left, they're super interested in it, and they want to know what the hell grandpa was up to in the 1940s. So, and then it always turns into this kind of dance where you're asking questions and they're sort of remembering this happened and that. And then they go in the attic and they literally find photographs or, a diary that grandpa left, and they send it to me. And so, it opened up a lot of doors. And then also even the simplicity of just going back to all the newspaper articles on the murder in 1941. Back in the 40s, newspaper articles were extraordinarily long. It's kind of like the way that podcasts are now. Like one article would be 6 or 7 pages of really small print, and there was an extraordinary amount of detail that was printed in the papers as well. So that was a great resource. And then I'm putting together all of this information on the murder. And it's like one thing after another mirrors that of Elizabeth Short. So I'm making this list as I'm going through everything, and I'm like, oh my God, that's really similar. That's really
What
similar.
was the moment, the aha moment, when you were like, this is the guy? I know it.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Thank you. We're going to stop there.
Thank you. You win, Kyle.
I'm going to end on that
one. You got me. It's a gotcha interview.
It's a yes and no, and then a gotcha interview. Yeah. And I feel like I just won.
That's right. You did. Right. You did. I don't know where to go from here.
Well, let's back it up and go right back to that.
Yeah.
Oh, your lovely wife just walked in. Amazing. She is. We're about to get to her section of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. What did I just ask? I don't even remember.
The moment that
the aha moment where you were like, look,
okay, so
this is it. Did you ever think maybe I should call the police? Should I get anyone else involved in this?
No, I never thought of that.
I'm gonna just write a book, a bestseller about this.
Let me tell you what would have happened if I called the LAPD and told them I have information on the Black Dahlia case. I think I would have probably gotten arrested. So there was a moment where I remember kind of, my skin started crawling. I had no evidence that this suspect knew this other woman yet. They'd gone to college together, but I had to kind of establish it. And then, I'm going through tons of documents, and I happened to find this one little article. It's tiny in the newspapers in like 1936, 1937. And it's for an organization called the Demolay Organization, which I had no idea what it was, but apparently it's like all over the country and it's been around since the 19 teens. And Walt Disney was in it when he lived in Kansas City. And it's a fraternal organization that started in Kansas City and all that. It doesn't matter. Anyway, it's got like a volunteer organization. So the suspect was kind of the head precept or whatever for a while. He was like the master, what's called the master counselor. And in that class that he was in there was the name of Leela Welsh, the other woman's boyfriend. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait, there's a personal connection here. He knows her boyfriend, which meant there's we can start following that. And then I start reading about how they have all these dances. So, okay, it's likely she would have gone to those dances because that's, the man she loved and she had been with for years. And then, I started pulling those threads. And I mean, even from Kansas City, there were, I started getting like, what do you call it? Like, the brochures for an event, and they would have the suspect and Leela Welsh's name on the same committee. It just more and more, they started getting, I started able to put them closer together. And then I discovered all these kind of parallels, like they went to the same church, they went to the same lake house, myriad other things that where their lives kind of crossed, and there were all these parallels. And it was, but that one little article that, was just in page 82 or whatever of the paper, at the bottom of the paper, it just happened, having to see that and happening to see that all of a sudden. And it just started this kind of, this trail of evidence that they were, in kind of constant proximity with each other for over 10 years.
So I know you said that everybody that worked on the case is no longer alive. Mm-hmm. And you didn't talk to anyone really in law enforcement about this. If you could ask one question to the lead detectives in this case, if they were standing in front of you right now, one question, what would you ask them?
I only get one?
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe there's more. I mean, let's start with one, but if you have more, it sounds like you probably have a lot of questions for these guys.
I would ask them why they continue to pursue this one man whose name is Carl Balsiger. Why did you pursue him until the very end? And in fact, the cops who worked on it, the lead detectives, paid for their own travel to go to St. Louis and Houston and interview people about this suspect. And they took their vacation days to work on the case for years afterwards because they were so haunted by not solving it. And they pursued him, heartily. I think my question would be why, meaning like, what's your evidence? Because I really want to show you what mine is. But I would like to know what it was for them that made them so determined to keep pursuing him. Good question.
That's a great question.
Okay, yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah,
the answer's not so great, but the
I'm
question's
sure.
great.
I'm sure. And what has it been like with all the success of the book so far? Everybody's freaking out about it. I saw today it was like #1 on Amazon. It's like a big
true crime new releases. It's definitely not #1.
I mean, true crime is huge.
Yeah, it's big. Yeah.
I feel like everyone I talk to about true crime just goes bananas for true crime.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are working on with the rest of the Morning Moon team a little bit of a true crime sort of thing right now, and everyone I talk to about that is like goes crazy. So it's a big deal. True crime. So what has it been like for your family, your kids, your wife, sort of seeing you in this new light as mega superstar author?
Well, as soon as I become a mega superstar author, I'll tell you. I think for a long time for the family, it was like, what the hell is dad working on? And there were times when my daughter would, at 10 o'clock at night, walk over to the couch and sit down, and I have to like hide the photos and the evidence. And she'd be like, what are you hiding? And she actually got kind of interested. She started reading one of the chapters that wasn't bad. And so she's been asking me like, so what happened to that girl? And I want to tell her the truth. But I mean, I think everybody's been super supportive, but I think it's been this really weird, like, why are you, it's kind of like one of those, what's dad working on in the garage kind of things. And I think, especially for the kids, it's been kind of surreal to see that I wrote a book. But in some ways it's kind of cool. Like, they can see that it doesn't matter what your past is or, what your career is. You can always pursue things you're passionate about, and amazing things can come out of that. So, hopefully that's a good lesson.
Well, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, you've really pivoted into this amazing career. You're obviously,
well, we'll see, Kyle. I'm not sure.
You're hugely,
this might be it.
decorated producer, and now you're pivoting into this, and it's really amazing. I couldn't be happier for
Thank you.
And congratulations. Well, listen, it's gotten to that time of the evening.
Oh no, we're done with this
part? Well, we're gonna pivot.
Okay.
And we're going to open it up
to
some questions from the audience, and questions only. No stories. Maybe you also solved the murder at one point. Maybe you are a murderer and you want to talk about that.
We'll find out.
I don't know, but let's talk about that another time.
Yeah.
So just questions. Yes.
Why do you think the police didn't have enough to prosecute this guy when they followed him for years?
Yeah.
They had evidence that wasn't in writing that you found, but they never prosecuted him.
Yeah, so a lot of the evidence they had, I'll give you a piece of, here's a little clue. So on the body of Elizabeth Short, it's one of the big mysteries. Her body, after she was severed and all these, horrible things were done to her, the killer washed the body, okay? Washed it totally clean. It was drained of blood. It was exsanguinated. And then he proceeded to take a scrub brush and brush the wounds, right? And so a lot of they were open wounds. There were a lot of brush bristles that they found in these open wounds. It's a very famous part of the case. And nobody knows why he washed her, okay? And why he took the time to do that. The family of the business partner of the suspect, of Carl Balsiger, I spoke with them. And they told me that the cops told them that the brush bristles, and this part has never been made public, were determined to come from a baker's scrub brush, which is very, very strong because of dough being stuck on the surface. It's made of coconut fiber. The only other things back then that were made of coconut fiber were hardwire brooms and then floor mats and stuff. So, scrub brushes for bakers are extremely tough, right? You probably wouldn't use them in your own kitchen. But they found these coconut fiber scrub brushes, which only bakers use. So the suspect was a salesman of bakery supplies, and also they just opened up a bakery together. And even just that little clue, and there's a lot more in the book, made them believe there's a connection here, obviously. They knew about the other murder in Kansas City, and there's a lot more evidence the book goes into.
And this is the guy that you have pegged as the killer.
Correct.
Who's also potentially a baker.
Well,
or baking supplies.
He was actually an executive and he had opened up.
He had access to these baking tools.
Oh, yeah. He was selling the supplies and stuff as well.
I mean, this seems like a pretty easy, I'm no detective, but I don't know. I want to say
yeah.
I mean, he had a whole box.
You would make the arrest.
He had a box of them in his trunk.
Yeah.
He was selling them door to door. These brushes.
Yeah.
She's got the bristles on her.
Yeah.
I mean.
You've solved the case.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I should write a book.
I think you should just put your name on it.
Right, that's a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good idea.
Scrub these out.
All right.
So, but to your question, they have these brush bristles, right? That's not going to stand up in court. Defense lawyer is going to say there's a million people who are bakers out there. So they had a lot of kind of circumstantial evidence, and here's the thing, they didn't understand what had happened in the Lila Welsh murder. Now, if they had all the details and they knew how similar all the two murders were and all the signatures of the murder itself, it might have been a different story. And so that's what I was determined to do, was to compare these two murders. And in so doing, you find all these similarities. It's a different picture. But I think without that information, they were kind of grasping at straws. And also, I suspect that when they questioned him, when they went through that process, these guys were really experienced veteran cops. They probably figured there's something not right here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sir,
Yes, sir. The gentleman.
sir in the back.
Yes.
Well, you guys can solve the case together. That would be
I would
great.
love that.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
might later tonight.
Let's
We'll
do
see.
it. All right.
So my
Yeah,
question
go ahead.
is, when did you decide that this was a book? You have a background in documentary. Like, talk about that path.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
God, that's a good question. Yeah, because
Another great question.
God, morning moon coming
This
through.
is
Great,
fantastic.
but yes.
God.
You know, it's actually a really good question because when I was doing all this research, it literally was just an escape from the pandemic. It was like, you know, like I said, it was either bread or this. So for the longest time, it was just like my weird hobby. And then more and more, I kept finding more and more information. And then there would be another source that would send me documents or photographs or whatever it was. It was just like one thing after another, these doors would open. And then I would talk to somebody and they're like, you know, you should talk to this person because he lived in, you know, his mom was in Kansas City in the 1920s and 30s. And she knew people who were in this area. And so I'd call them and she'd be like, call this person. It just kept snowballing and aggregating all this information. And then by doing that, I was just doing research. By doing that, I started seeing what the story was. And having worked in documentary and reality TV, that's what we do. We get hundreds, thousands of hours of footage, and then we have to figure out what's the story here. And so I had that skill set to some extent. Some may argue I don't have that skill set, but you know, that is documentary. It is reality TV. It you know, is shooting as much as you can and then figuring out what the structure is. And slowly, as I'm getting all this information, it's like footage. I'm starting to see what the narrative is and how to put it together. And at some point, I remember I think I talked to you about this. Like, is it a podcast? We talked about. And at one point it was like,
What did I say?
You will never sell this as a book.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
You need to change careers
Yeah.
immediately.
No, I was like, don't do this. This is not good.
You were very supportive, but I think you were like, is it a podcast or is it a book? You know, and
Now look.
I should have done a podcast.
Yeah.
This
could be a podcast.
It could be. It
Yeah.
could be. But it was like there was just too much information, even for like 10 hours of a podcast. And I just felt that a book would do more justice to it. And also, so much of the book is about the victims and who they were and understanding who they were as real people, as three-dimensional people. And I just felt like the printed word and reading the printed word is going to create more impact for people rather than, you know, hearing my voice on a podcast talking about them.
Wow. Joe.
Hi, I mean, this sounds completely, totally interesting. It's beyond DB Cooper. You know?
Oh, I love DB Cooper. Yeah.
And, I mean, well, I'm curious because I haven't read the book and I don't know who I know some of the suspects.
Mm-hmm.
He was a baking salesman.
In the Kansas City murder,
Mhm.
6 years prior, when he made those two thumps in the 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And then the mother of that woman, Layla.
Yeah.
Yeah. She'd wake up till 10 o'clock, but where was he from 3 to 10 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, so the timeline, we're pretty sure we know that the killer in the Kansas City murder.
Did he stay over there?
Did he stay?
Did he stay in the room?
Yes,
He did.
but not until 10 a.m.
Oh.
So I'll explain. When the murder occurred early in the morning. So what happened was Leila Welsh she's an heiress to a real estate fortune in Kansas City. Her family was really instrumental in helping to build the city. But she and her family, she lived with her mother and her brother. They lived very modestly. They lived in a small home together. She gets home from a date with her boyfriend. They went to the circus on March 9th, 1941. She gets home at 1:30 a.m., kisses her mother goodbye, washes up, and then goes to bed around 2 a.m. Around 3 a.m., her mother wakes up, and her mother, by the way, is sleeping like 15 feet away in the next room, right? At 3 a.m., her mother is awoken by the sounds of 2 deep thuds, is the way that she described it. It was loud enough to wake her. She gets up, she walks in the living room, and she sees her son asleep on the couch. The light is still on. She turns the light off, and then she walks back into her bedroom and goes to sleep. What she doesn't know is that 15 feet away in her daughter's bedroom, through the open window that her daughter left open because she wanted some fresh air, A man had crawled in around 3 a.m. holding essentially a satchel of implements, of tools of murder that he had brought. He had been standing outside for about 4 or 5 hours in 31-degree weather in a very small backyard onto which 36 windows of neighboring homes looked out onto, right? It's very tight. When you're in the neighborhood and hanging from trees, you can see all the windows looking directly onto the bedroom window. So he took an enormous risk in doing that. He slips through her window and into the room, and then takes a 4.5 pound. Remember, he's carrying all these murder tools with him. He quietly lays them down. He takes out a 4.5 pound railroad chisel or track hammer, which is like a much bigger version of a hammer, and then proceeds to strike her in the right temple, fracturing her skull twice. And those were the sounds that awoke Marie Welsh. So when she's walking back to her room to go to sleep, she doesn't know that a vicious killer at that moment is exsanguinating her daughter and cutting pieces of flesh out of her body, which is pretty crazy. So the process of exsanguinating a body of blood takes a while. It's even though blood splashes out, it's got to come out of the arteries. It's a long process, about an hour and a half. And then he continues in that room doing his quote unquote work for at least another half hour, 45 minutes later. But he was in no rush. And one of the reasons we know he's not in a rush is because after he left, after he went back out through the window, this is very weird, he pulled down the curtains and the drapes and he proceeded to fold them in pleats, almost like a formal dining napkin, on the windowsill of her room. And he left this very pretty, arranged curtain and drapes standing outside, 36 windows looking out. And if anybody got woken up or went to their kitchen, remember, we're like 4:30 a.m. here at this point. If anybody had looked out, they would have seen him doing that. He then takes the butcher knife that he used in the murder and stabs it into the ground right outside her window. So it's just, standing up right there. And then as he's walking through the backyards and making his escape, he slowly discards all of his tools, his gloves, and a 5-inch diameter, but 1-inch thick piece of flesh that he has carved out of her body. He discards it into a neighbor's yard. And all of that evidence, which is insane, because like as a killer, if anybody wants to be a killer, don't leave your evidence behind. It's a really bad move. And not only does he leave all the evidence behind in the trail, but he leaves this kind of missing puzzle piece of flesh that he's taken out of her body in the yard, which is really weird. It almost seems like that's what he went to do, and then he just discards it. So he probably was there until about 4:30 a.m., 3 to 4:30. Though we don't know. He may have been there for hours more as well.
Wow.
Yeah, she woke up so her son wakes up.
So she's the one that found her?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
And her son woke up around 7:45 a.m. He's making himself breakfast. She gets up and says, "Let me make breakfast for you." He's got to go to work. It's a Sunday, but he works in real estate. He's like, "Mom, I gotta go." She's making him, "No, you need a good meal." All the meanwhile, 15 feet away is an utter horror show in her daughter's bedroom. And then the son goes off to work and she's cleaning up the house. And then finally it's time to wake her daughter for church. And she opens the door and there is a chair that has been jammed up against the doorknob, which is really weird, but she's still able to open it. And the first thing she notices when she walks in is that the east window is open and it's very cold. There's a big chill coming through that window. And she's walking towards the window, and all of a sudden she sees there's a massive pool of blood on the ground. And she asks her daughter, "Have you had a nosebleed?" And she hears the dripping of blood. Drip, drip, drip. The body is still at 9 a.m., 6 hours later, is still dripping. And then she walks over, she looks at the bed. The covers have been pulled over her daughter. And she pulls the covers back, and there is the nearly severed head of her daughter and a horror show in the body. And she, obviously crashes out, as the kids say.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So the Black Dahlia in LA, Woodward Park, was discovered by a woman with a baby carriage.
Stroller, yeah.
And it's 14 feet in the weeds.
Yeah.
How did she happen to see it with a baby carrier?
Yeah. So
That's a great question.
that's a great question.
Because all these other
Yeah.
people didn't see it, but she's pushing the
Right.
baby.
So what she
What is she doing in the weeds?
so what she told me was that
Why she have this baby in the weeds like that?
Oh,
you know?
you're saying she's a bad mother.
I don't know. I mean,
You're asking questions.
I'd like to, you know.
You're asking the
Simple
difficult
question,
questions
hey,
other people don't.
Why'd
ask.
you have the baby in the weeds?
Or
you
have
know?
the baby in the first place?
Yeah.
She glanced.
Why
her,
did you have this baby?
It's the one question nobody asks.
Right.
Nor should they.
Right.
So she's going down the street on the sidewalk, and she turns to her right at one point, and what she sees is this kind of shining white form, 14 feet away, that's kind of hidden. She doesn't understand what it is. She's curious about it because it's so stark white. The sun is kind of shining off of it. We now know why it was so white. It's because the body was drained of blood. And so it had been sitting in the sun for several hours at that point. And she was curious about what it was because it was an odd looking form. It kind of looked like a mannequin, but she stepped maybe 4 or 5 feet into the weeds and saw just the top half. And it was so striking. It was face down. And one of the only parts of the body that wasn't mutilated besides the legs and the feet was the back. So it just appeared stark white, cut in half. Literally, you can see the cavity in the bottom part of the torso. And she figures it's a mannequin. And so she walks, the 4 or 5 feet back to the stroller. And she'd been seeing kids earlier in the day riding around in their bicycles on the street. So her first thought was, this is going to freak these kids out. So, the police should do something about this. She never figures out that it's a body until the newspapers come out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Why did he stop at 2 victims?
Well,
You're at 2. You might as well keep going.
This is his thing.
Right? He's pretty good at it. All right.
so there were some other sort of
Ben's now a little concerned by this question.
I'm
from
concerned too.
Tessa. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right.
Was he being spooked? Like,
Yeah.
did he think he was going to get caught?
Here's the deal. I don't really know.
Yeah.
There were some other deaths over the course of his life, which are mysterious. Specifically, one, his 7-year-old sister drowned when he was 12 years old, and the circumstances of that drowning.
I don't like the way that sounds.
Yeah, very, very mysterious, right?
Yeah.
And I talk about the kind of the sort of circumstantial evidence behind that. And his first wife died in kind of tragic and somewhat mysterious circumstances
What?
as well. But
You're just solving all these murders now.
or not.
I mean,
But these
you might be the greatest detective of all time.
maybe.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. There's 2 murders that I believe that he committed. Whether there are others, it would be a pretty laborious research project. But for example, later on in his life, when he's in his late 50s, mid 50s, he has to escape because he embezzled a ton of money from an insurance company, and he ends up escaping in 1968 to the Bahamas, right? And a year later, he got in some major trouble. The family never found out what the hell happened in the Bahamas, but he was extradited out. He was sent out of the Bahamas back to the United States. They kicked him out. He was some kind of big legal trouble. Instead of getting a job and getting an apartment in Kansas City, he takes his old white Rambler station wagon out of storage and spends the next 5 years driving around the northern Midwest, Ohio, Nebraska, Indiana, Minnesota, back and forth. He lives out of his car. And, when I get some time, maybe when the next pandemic hits, hopefully it won't, it would be a really interesting research project, I think, to see if are there any cold cases in that area. Because just the fact that he's on the highways for 5 years is kind of chilling.
I feel like there probably is.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Well, let's work on that together.
I mean,
all right.
All right. We have time for maybe 10 more questions. All right.
I know you.
What's the next case that you're going to solve?
That's a good one.
Is there one?
Yes, there is. I'm working on a story right now. I can't tell you what it is just yet, but it's
You have to kill me.
no, because I'd have to give you royalties. I don't want to have to send you a check. It's I'm working on another situation right now. I really love this stuff. So.
Another situation.
Yeah, I'll let you know soon. I promise. It's a great question. What's next?
We got one over here. We got one over.
Yes, sir.
So, as a first-time writer, what was the process like for you to pivot from your career as it was, and then go to publishers and say, "Hey, I got another book about the Black Dahlia"? That must have been
God, great question. So, when I hadn't written a thing yet, I had all this research, and this is really early on. Like, I didn't really know what the story was, but I thought, wow, I know all this info about the Black Dahlia case that nobody has, ever printed before. It'd be really cool to have that all in a book, which was really naive because that is not enough to sell a book. So I have representation in William Morris Endeavor in television, and I asked the agents, hey, I want to write a book. Wouldn't that be cool? And they're like, sure, we'll hook you up. They basically just wanted me to go away. So like called this guy in New York. He's a literary agent. And so the guy in New York, he's a really big literary agent. He's like, okay, sure. Yeah, I'll do a call with you. So we set a call. It happened to be on January 6th, 2021. That was the date it was scheduled for. I got like 5 minutes to pitch my, the most passionate story I could think of. And I got to sell him on it. And I could hear in the background CNN. And as I'm pitching, I just hear, oh my God, what are they doing? This is insane. Yeah. And what's the book about? It was the most awkward pitch I think I've ever done. You would know some of our awkward pitches. And after I pitched my story, he paused, and I could still hear, Don Lemon, whoever was, the newscaster at that point, talking, and he's listening to him. And there's this pause, and then he says, whew, I can hear the passes now. I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, you don't got a suspect, you don't have evidence, you don't have a story. How the hell am I supposed to sell this thing? I mean, it was like blunt, we're talking New York, old school literary agent. They're not there to let's get lunch together. So he just tore it apart. And then at the end, he was like, but if you have some interesting stuff, come back to me, keep working on it. And then I asked him, I said, well, okay, Mel, should I go ahead and write the book? And it's like in TV, if you're pitching a show and you ended up producing and paying for the whole series and then going to sell it. You wouldn't do that. You would go, you get the network to pay for it. So, I said, should I just write the whole book and then send it to you? And he said, God, no. Don't waste your time, was his exact words. Just write up a proposal. And I said, what's a book proposal? And he goes, look it up online. And he's still reacting this whole time to what's happening at the Capitol that day and making comments about it in between all this stuff. And so I said, okay, Mel, I'll put together a proposal. He goes, great, go away. So, I started working on my proposal and putting it together, and I sent it to him maybe 2 months later, and I crafted every word. And by the way, to your question, I learned a lot about writing in that 2 months, which I hadn't really done before. But I kind of forced myself to okay, let's figure out how to be a good writer here and trying to make this sound good. So I put it together, this proposal. I worked my tail off. It was just so crafted. I put everything I had into it night and day. And then I was so proud. And I put it in the email, and I was like, please, God, let him love it. And I emailed it to him. And the next day he emailed back and he said, this is terrible. He goes, you've got so many murders. I don't know who the hell is chasing who and what got solved and what didn't. It's a friggin' mess. But if you want me to take it out, I will, but it's going to get passed on and all that. And I was pretty crushed. And it was kind of like the dream was over. Like, I put so much work in this proposal, and not only was it like it should be better, it was like, this is awful. And then so I was working on a couple shows, and I got distracted, and I was like, well, that's it. I tried. Hey, I put a book proposal together. That's pretty cool. And I moved on. And then about a year and a half later, there was one Saturday where it was like something woke me up and at 6 a.m. and I was like, I gotta go to the library today, because there were all these newspaper articles about the case, about the Black Dahlia, that were on microfiche, which I used to use in high school at the downtown LA library. And you could only get them on microfiche at the library. And I put it off for so long. And so I went down to the library and started looking at stuff, and all of a sudden all this stuff is popping up, and it's, the neurons start firing. And then, over the next 3 years, I just kept going. And then I sent him the proposal. Well, actually, it was maybe a year later for the proposal. Sent the proposal, and I remember I got an email back on Sunday, and he wrote, "This is great. We're taking this out." So it was,
Nice.
it was a nice. It took a while, but it just goes to show, like, even when all hope is lost, like, there's still a glimmer of hope.
Wow. I feel like that deserves a round of applause.
Yeah.
Well, it was absolutely amazing. Thank you for writing this book. Thank you for solving all these murders all over the country.
That's what I'm here for.
Really incredible. And thank you to Zibby for creating this amazing bookstore and this community, and to Caroline and to Mike and to Tessa and to the unofficial president of Zibby's bookshop, Ben, over there in the corner, and to Zibby, who's back home in New York putting the kids to bed, and I think watching possibly online.
Okay. Oh,
we'll
good.
see. Yeah.
So. Nice.
So I'm sure I'll get some notes later. And
Me too.
She'll tell me you ran over 3 minutes. So it wasn't great. But anyway, so thank you guys all for coming. That was really awesome.
Can I also say thank you and a big round of applause for an amazing interview? You were great. Thanks, everybody.
That was fun.
Yeah.
And everybody buy books and get them signed by Eli, and get your picture taken.
Good job, man.
Yeah.
That was great.
That was fun, man.
It was so fun. You know what? It was actually light, not like in a weird, like,
In a weird